I know. I'm waiting. The title of today's Dharma talk at this all-day retreat is Gradual and Spontaneous, or Spontaneous and Gradual. Gradual meaning stretched out, taking a while, plotting, planning, going this way and going that way, following a form, avoiding a form. Gradual, gradual, going up the mountain. Provisional, it's a provisional teaching, so and it's necessary. But one can get caught in that gaining idea of thinking there's some kind of thing that we have to get or catch on to. And we can get magnetized or even seduced into falling down into the conceptual area and just spending a lot of time in that area looking for stuff like success or like peace or nirvana. And through the practice of sitting meditation, shikantaza, through the practice of holding very still and just endeavoring to see very, very clearly what it is that is arising moment by moment by moment, we train ourselves to see or witness what is in motion, what is actually going from here to there, or seems to be going from here to there, or changing shape or color or what have you. Relative truth, coming and going. And of course the word spontaneity or gradual, spontaneous awakening, gradual awakening, there's disagreement. In fact, in the Chinese, the Chan lineage, there was arguments back and forth between the northern and southern schools. Some claiming it's a spontaneous thing, some claiming it's gradual, and they're both correct. And when I say correct, I'm not saying I've traveled to ancient China and studied all of that, or I've even read all of their texts or all of their explanations, their commentaries and so on, but a little bit of that over the years. And also looking at that myself over time, using my own training awareness practice, both in Zen practice or shikantaza, and also just the formless practice that shows up in the practices of the Vajrayana or Tantra, along with all of the other formal practices of creation completion. We're creating forms, doing mantras, doing visualizations, mudras, and so on. But the interesting thing about this is, rather than pick one over the other or try to find out, is it this or is it that, to see that they're actually not separate from each other, that they're not actually two different things. To think that there's two different things is a belief in samsara, or a belief in this relative world, and a belief that some things are right, some things are wrong. It's the whole schema of duality that we attach to. It's very difficult because the whole world is, if you look around us at all, outside our own family, neighborhood, sangha, and into the world, it's just a wild, it's like the Wild West, or like the movies of the Wild West. So what's being emphasized by even talking about such a polarity is so that you can see that it seems to be necessary to do a certain amount of gradual studying, looking at different teachings, looking at different concepts, spending time on the cushion, doing solitary retreat practice, which I recommend, doing a practice residency, which we do here, which is meditating, but also working with Sangha, doing work periods and so on, interacting, preparing food, hanging out, socializing even. That's something that for a good number of years I'm following the patterns that were laid out in Shambhala of having a retreat, but having it silent. Not in all cases, but in quite a few, especially early on. And I'm not saying this was incorrect, it's just that I don't care to do that these days. I would rather have people, they're silent enough on the cushion, they're silent enough in here when they get up off the cushion. People need to get to know each other. I think back over retreats that I went to years and years ago where I saw people, but I have no idea who they were, what their names were. It doesn't seem to be too supportive to building a Sangha or a community of practitioners. So there's so much material on this gradual and immediate, or kind of going along and gradually getting more and more kind of understanding about it. We can gradually see that we're doing less fighting, there's less warfare, maybe there's less. So we're kind of talking to ourselves about it. We're doing a little better, we're getting a little better. This last meditation was pretty good. I seem to understand something a little bit more. I think I understand emptiness a little better. I think, a gradual situation, and then the spontaneous or immediate realization or understanding may or may not come to you. And if it does come, it probably will go away, because the very nature of gradual things is to keep rumbling along, and the very nature of immediate things is to show up and go away. But if you see that they're not two, then nothing really happens. In the conventional sense, when I'm saying nothing happens, I'm not trying to encourage you to try to see how nothing's really happening. I would rather have you watch what's happening, watch what's moving. Sit down on your cushion, watch what moves. If you do that, that's a very simple formula, extremely simple. Sit down, hold still, watch what moves. You'll see the very thing that you'll see personally, the way you involve yourself in the three poisons: passion, aggression, ignorance. You'll see the way in which you push things away. You'll see the way in which you encourage things or fluff things up or explain them or delineate them or explain them to yourself. And you'll see the way that you distract yourself, shut down, or go into some other kind of a daydream that keeps you from realizing that moment by moment you're not doing much. You're sitting on a cushion looking at a dumb wall. So I often say, and I'm saying now, this is a do-it-yourself project. It's a project that you personally, the person that you looked at in the mirror this morning, that person's all by him or herself, in a sense, in a pretty important sense. You're going to have to see this. And when you do see this, you will have probably great difficulty explaining it to anyone. You probably won't even say, I understand this now. You might. You might come to me and say, Sokuzan, I understand. And I'll say, oh yeah? So I can go on more about this, but I really, this could be sometimes I give talks that are kind of flat, and sometimes I give talks that have some energy around them, and it energizes me to interact with people. So if you have any questions about this kind of material, thank you, Brittany.
What was your experience with realization? Was it gradual, sudden, combo?
Both. I had the understanding, a flash of understanding before I even started meditating. I was reading a lot of books on it, so I was doing a lot of, and I had it in the middle of reading the book by Alan Watts, the book on the taboo against knowing who you are, which I don't know what's in that book because I haven't looked at it in 50 years. So probably a pretty good book. So I had a flash reading that when I fell off a donkey. So I don't recommend that. Not a good idea. You could break your neck. And then another one I had years later, actually it's anniversary of that's coming up the 1st of June, 40 years ago, 1977, when I was in a retreat. That was an opening that opened up where I realized, you've probably heard me talk about this before, where nothing sleeps. It was a realization. It wasn't a thought. And then I spent the last 40 years after that gradualizing. Good question. More about that?
What does it mean, nothing sleeps?
It means that the fundamental situation is completely awake all the time. It's Buddha nature. Is everywhere, pervades everything and everyone. And if you realize it, you no longer will have an individual life. You'll have individuality that'll function in relationship to people, but you'll no longer grasp at a self or grasp at an other. That's why the teaching of the Vijnanavada or the Yogacara teaching of perception only is such a powerful teaching, because it actually brings your attention. If you can use those concepts, it brings your attention. It doesn't starve the objectivity, and it doesn't starve the subjectivity. It just doesn't do a lot of fuel that way. It basically puts it in the perception. So your awareness comes down to a single point, and that's perception only. Or as it's put in that book, projection only. There's different ways of saying it. You say consciousness only, projection only, perception only. Lots of ways of saying that, yes.
And that perception includes both the subjective and objective knowledge?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you think of you, that's part of the perception. It's included with everything else. If you think of the object, that's the perception. So that's why these teachings talk about it being non-dual, not separate. Even in the midst of all this incredible separation, where some people are really, really at war with each other. Even people who are very kind and sweet and wouldn't hurt, what do they call them? Fleas. Would not hurt fleas. You've heard that expression, haven't you? That old ancient Chinese saying. You wouldn't hurt the flea. So those people get sucked in, a person who's basically doing okay if nothing challenges them. If something is challenging, they start looking for weapons. How do I know? I do it. That's how I know about it. I haven't left anything. I once said in here, not too long ago, I don't know what the context was, but Bruce and Terry were both here. Bruce, who came and ate with us and practiced with us this morning, his wife, Terry, I met them both in 1974. We went out to Boulder together. So 40 some years ago. And one day in here I said, made some expression, maybe one of you can remember, I said, nothing's changed. I'm no different than I've ever been. And she said, she didn't raise up her hand to say this. She just shouted, "Ha!" Which meant, oh my, he thinks I'm worse, better. And she said, "Ha! You're still just as terrible as you ever were." But it shows you what perception does. We project onto things. We project onto others our own confusion. It's just it's such a simple thing. There's no way to get wisdom. There's no way to get from here to there, because there's just here. Not two. I highly encourage you, before you pass from this realm, this human realm, to realize this, so that when you pass, nothing happens. And I'm not just saying some kind of, that's a fancy way of saying something that I'll never figure out. Questions are good if you have. Sir.
How does the storehouse consciousness come into play with the gradual realization?
Well, we keep stuff keeps getting triggered and keeps coming down, and we look at it, and we over time, depending on what your own path is, we start to see that something's fishy here. Something happens here, and we have an emotion that is in no way lined up with what just happened. And yet there's this you're having this intense feeling, and you're wanting to blame someone who's, from the relative point of view, is kind of innocent of doing it. Maybe they tripped over your toy box or something. Maybe they did something inadvertently, or even advertently. Is that a word? Yeah, even if they advertently did something, which was combined with their causes and conditions, what they felt they needed to do, and they knew this might bother you a little bit, but they needed to do this because this needed to be done. Then you look at it, and I'm not saying accusing anybody of anything. I'm just saying that, but then you'll notice that this is where the image or the idea of the eighth consciousness comes from. There probably isn't any such thing, but it's a way that we can look at the mind that shows there seems to be some aspect of the mind that stores things that are unresolved, or seem to have some kind of tension to them, or some kind of grasping or rejecting or shutting down. And when they're stored, it seems like that memory is kind of stuck to it. So then we're living our life, we're going along, and then we meet somebody, or somebody does something, and they do something that, relatively speaking, someone else looking on and say, what's the big deal? All they did was this and this. And someone might say, well, I can see her be a little irritated, but you blew your stack. Because because this unresolved stuff in here again, the conceptual idea in the eighth consciousness, or the Alevijnana, the storage house of habit energy, it gets triggered, and this stuff that's kind of sitting up there because it's unresolved, it's just been packed away. It gets triggered, and boom, it comes down and floods into this present consciousness as if it's happening right here and right now. So then, as a meditator, what we do is we just experience it. Don't try to get rid of the alaya. That's another thing that happens when we try to stop that energy, because part of the thing is we begin to realize that some of our negative and intense emotions are unreal. They're imaginary. But if they're imaginary, why would you fight with them? But don't fight. And one of the ways that you can do this, and this is very hard on the ego mind, one of the ways you can do this is lose. Actually have it come down and let it hurt you without blaming, and without shutting down. Aggression, passion, ignorance, without doing anything with it. It is not comfortable, but it seems necessary to kind of go through that gauntlet of your own emotional reactions on your own. It's a very individual, very personal thing. We do it to each other, especially people who are in very close relationships will trigger. And that's why I often say, don't let your friend or your partner or your sangha, brother or sister, let them have their negativity. Don't go in and fight with them about it. If they're having it, their negativity might trigger your negativity, and then quite often that'll happen that you were doing fine until they got really mad, and then you got really mad because they were really mad, and you're upset because, what are you doing? And this is nothing. And you know what I mean. You could probably tell as many stories as I could about it. Kevin.
2 questions. My first one, continuing this line.
Yes, a little louder, please.
Yeah, continuing this line of thought.
Yes.
These days we hear a lot about self-care and not putting yourself in line for being made a fool of or hurt by others, and so in the same way that we can lose the war with ourselves, we can also lose the war with others?
Yes. Yeah, it might not show up as a credential. They might not even know that you're doing that. And if you are doing it, probably they won't. If you're really, truly, somebody's done something and it has triggered something with you, and it's starting to roil around in here. If you're really working with it, they may never even know about it.
So what is the difference between that approach and what Trungpa Rinpoche called idiot compassion?
So Trungpa Rinpoche, talking about idiot compassion as opposed to, or contrasted with true compassion, is idiot compassion is more about you wanting to be a compassionate person. So you're going to go and help somebody, or extend yourself to try to soften up their situation. Is there some aspect of it that you specifically want me to talk about?
Well, I guess I'd always thought of idiot compassion as like being a doormat to other people, but that's.
I'm not saying it isn't that way. You may have an angle on it that might be just as workable, or just as interesting or helpful. But the idiot compassion, I think that he was talking about was to be supportive of somebody in a way which gets in the way of them experiencing their karma, of experiencing their mind. And so if you're able to meet yourself where you're at, then there's a good chance, very good chance, that when someone else goes through whatever they're going through, you're going to be able to get an idea, because you're there, you're paying attention, you've been paying attention to this mind for a long time, you're starting to get pretty good at seeing what's happening out here, and then you'll kind of see how much support they need. It might be just enough to say, I know you can handle this. Or it might be, it might be so far as to take them aside and say, let's talk about this. What are you going through? What's happening? And in another situation, you might, and I know in the early days when I was, this idiot compassion thing was a big thing in the 70s, believe me. I mean, everybody was trying not to be an idiot compassionator. No, they were all trying to do that, and so therefore it was very difficult to be around the Vajradhatu Sangha, because they were all assholes. They were very difficult. I mean, they were out and out mean to everyone. I know people were mean to me, and I tried to be mean to others, because that's what I thought. We're all enlightened, and you're not. Tough shit. I shouldn't be saying that on this show. Is that a four-letter word?
Where's William?
1, 2, 3. William's here.
You're good.
I'm good? Okay.
That's okay. There's another one.
Phew, that's good. Certainly don't want to hurt anybody's feelings who doesn't like, and I know Ruby's not here. If Ruby's here, I don't swear,
She might be just
usually.
now.
So, yes, Sheldon.
You were talking earlier about the eighth consciousness, how
Yeah.
that something could trigger something being released from the eighth consciousness.
Seems like it, yeah.
I wonder if all emotions don't actually come to us in that same way.
There's something to that. There's something to that. I don't know if there's a way. At least I don't know of a way to go in and actually, parse it all out to find out where the emotions are and what they come from. Trungpa Rinpoche used to call emotions a high-speed thought. It just is a way of getting out of answering the question, I guess. I don't know. How do you know what an emotion is like? We all have them. What are they? They're really overwhelming. They're powerful. Sometimes they can knock us right off our feet, and other times they can preoccupy us that we can't. Even though we're kind of giving little mini lectures to ourselves. I shouldn't do this. Shouldn't feel this. Or this is ridiculous. Why am I having all this intense feeling over that thing? So usually that starts to happen more and more with meditators, because the meditators begin to see the way they're being duped by their own, you could say karma, their own causes and conditions that arise as any given person. Some people really have a problem with temper. Other people don't really have that at all. They have an intense problem with jealousy, or an intense problem with anger. I mean, not anger, but depression, or just really, down in the dumps feelings all the time. Another person doesn't have that. They're just real sparky. So, so it varies quite a bit, and that's why it's so important to get to know yourself. Yes.
question from Brandon Klein out in Buffalo, New York.
Yes, Brandon Klein.
Could you please ask, should we be watching the thoughts or using different forms to slow them from arising?
Don't slow them, don't manipulate thoughts whatsoever, but just see them. And if you can, as it's sometimes taught in different traditions, if you can see them coming, you can see how they hang around, you can see how they leave. Or maybe you can't. But that's still an awareness practice, to see that you can't find the beginning of the thought, you can't find the end of it, and yet you're having an experience. But it is so spacey. I mean, it's intense and it's there, but we can't really find, it doesn't have a solid shape to it. Just bring your awareness to that. What it does is it introduces you to the vastness of your mind. Mind is completely vast when you start to, your allegiance, if you could say it that way, starts to change over from the little things that are happening in our mind, from, what we call daily struggles and passion, aggression, and ignorance that are rising, over to the complete incredible space in which all of this is occurring. And you begin to see that you're not different from that space. Sounds kind of fancy, but it's flat out ordinary when you see it. Nothing special at all. Kevin?
Earlier you said that when we die, when we exit this human existence,
Yes.
you hope that, I'm paraphrasing, that
Sure.
we'll have the experience that nothing happens.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that as we pass out of this realm, that anything that arises from passion, aggression, ignorance, that we don't latch on to that?
Yeah.
So that
It's
it's
just a way of talking about it. It's very simple, just that don't do anything with it. That's the way it doesn't, nothing happens. You're not really separate from it, so you don't really have to be at war with anything. The very person who's coming after you to attack you, or the very situation that is so aggressive and difficult, that's you. That's very difficult to see. And if you do see it, you can't maintain it. Because then we get sunk right down into the relative structure of things. So we have to, it's just, sometimes people say it's just a touch and go. We just see it, it goes, and see it, it goes.
Can you talk about how to do that, touch and go practice with?
Right on the cushion. Sit down, watch your thoughts come up, you watch them, and then they go away, and then some more come up. And if they come, no matter positive, negative, or neutral, whatever comes, do nothing with it. Just observe it. It's like birds landing in a tree. You're watching a tree, birds come. Pretty soon they go away. Then another bird comes back. Must have forgot something. It's just simple little. You ever watch birds fly, land in trees and then leave? You ever wonder, where's he going? What's he doing? As what was, huh?
Emery said
Emery,
that.
yeah, Emery, Atean, DJ's son, Emery, would say, doing. Yes.
In the 30 verses of Vasubandhu, he talks about sense contact, sensation, perception, and volition are always associated with store consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
How does that relationship change through gradual awakening?
We just gradually see that it has a sense of, we see the difference between the part of it that's relatively true, and we see the aspect of that where it's not true at all. So we begin to see the duality or the polarity between things and see that they're not separate from each other as far as relative situation. And then to really see that, we begin to see, if you're talking about Vasubandhu, then we begin to see that everything is dependently arisen. Everything is dependent. Anything that's showing up is dependent on everything else for its appearance. And it's at some point your thinking mind goes, it's like that. It comes to stops. And you stop dreaming up a future and remembering a past. It's not that you don't remember it, and not that you don't know what you're going to have for lunch or something like that. It's not that you don't do that, but you realize that there's only this. But those are incredible abstractions.
So if all things are associated with the alia, what happens when there's that revolution at the base of consciousness?
Well, it's not separate then. It's no longer a separate little broom closet where stuff keeps tumbling out. It's here. It's everywhere. It's all the time. So you no longer are picking and choosing about your thought patterns. You're no longer concerned about what you're thinking or what anybody else is thinking, unless you're functioning as their teacher, and then you're very concerned about what they're thinking. If you have their permission to be their teacher, then you may function in a different way. But if you're just sitting in your living room, you're not really concerned about much of anything at all.
So things that are showing up, that arise, are still associated with the alia?
The alia is just a concept to help us. It's not an actual place. It's a concept that we use in order to show us this is the way it seems like things are working. It seems like there's some part of consciousness that tends to hang on to things in the dark somewhere. And then they get triggered, and then they start coming down as if they have some kind of reality to them that is, that wants its day in court. I feel this way. This is true. I need to, and then it will align itself with actual relative things so that it has proof. It wants proof. I have proof. What do you mean this is an illusion? I have proof. This guy actually hit me with a ball bat. He actually did it. So is that an illusion? That's the part when it gets difficult, because somebody actually did do something. It's just that's why it's so very seductive. That's why the whole world is fighting with everybody. And very few people are on a spiritual path, an actual transcendent path. Not many. I'm not out there counting them or anything, but it's rare that people don't think they have an axe to grind with somebody. And you'll even, if you're too, what they say, passive, people will come and get upset with you because you're not doing what they think you should be doing. People are always meddling with others, constantly. I do that too, but with permission. Yes?
About spontaneous and gradual, these feelings sometimes show up seemingly spontaneous. And they do that grippy thing, like in your heart, for example. How would you work with that, where it feels like there's a grasping with the heart?
Why are you smiling?
I love that word, grippy thing.
How would you work with that? Because it's a spontaneous gripping.
Yes.
And, just how...
What's your question?
I don't know. How would you work with it?
It sounds like you're doing it. Just keep doing it.
If I conceive of it as an impermanent thing, am I conceptualizing?
I wouldn't go that far.
Okay.
I wouldn't do anything with it. If it comes, then don't push it down. Aggression.
Right.
Don't explain it or fluff it up. Passion. And don't shut it off or go do something else. Every time that happens, try to.
Oh, it hurts.
Huh?
It hurts
Well, look at it.
to feel it.
Yeah, look at it. I understand. If you can, look at it, but don't torture yourself. Do it a little bit.
So we can gradually look at it. Is that okay to gradually look at it? I mean, like a little bit, like exposure therapy, kind of like, no? Oh, thank you.
Questions? You're not going to trick me. Well,
I'm not trying to trick.
Haley.
You said earlier that if in a situation, maybe we're making a mountain out of a molehill, or
Yes.
some emotion is coming that doesn't match the situation, we might need to let it come down without blaming this way or that way or shutting down.
Yes.
Could feeling that emotion without blaming still manifest as coming out towards the other person?
It could. Anything is possible. So it might, it's hard to say. There's no guarantee, there's no affirmation that if you do this and this, then this will happen.
How
If that's what
can
you're asking.
we
Yes.
feel that emotion or let that emotion come down without setting up a standard of this is what it's going to look like to feel that emotion?
Well, it sounds like you're already working with that. I mean, it's just a matter of, with the very thing you're talking about is just bring a lot of awareness into that. So it's not about changing that or doing something else. You're already doing what you need. You're asking me the question. By asking me the question, it tells me what's happening in your mind. Anytime anybody asks me a question, you don't say anything, I don't know what's going on. But if you ask me a question, I know what's going on. Not from the point of view of, oh, this is terrible, or this is good, or this is, I can see where you're working with that. So my response to you is, you're already doing that, just sit a lot. Don't try to change it or make it stronger. The way the idea, like in the paramitas, there's a sandru, or is it virya? Not virya. What's the Sanskrit for exertion? Virya? No, that's Tibetan. But anyway, exertion, paramita, doesn't mean pushing. It means staying with somebody and bringing your energy to it in the form of awareness. So then you'll know, because if you're there with your awareness, you'll know when you need to push on something, or you need to let something develop its own kind of energy. It takes, I think it takes a lot of the first two paramitas, dana and shila, generosity, discipline. It takes a lot of that to be able to understand energy and to work with energy in a way that is not just the conventional pushing on something or pulling on something or doing that. Or, I know I didn't answer your question, but I did, in the sense that I am affirming that you're looking at it the way you need to. It's just a matter of continuing to do that. That will, nothing lasts, so that will slowly, as you look at it like that and have that kind of a question about it, then you'll see how it'll begin to change. Much more powerful than anything I could say to you about it. Some kind of a palliative or some kind of a solution to it. Yes.
You said earlier, we project onto others our own confusion.
Yeah.
So how do we know it's not their confusion?
You know, I think it's not so important to try to figure that out. There's bound to be, you could probably find some kind of evidence there. But it's just, I think it's important to look at your own, look at what's happening with your mind when you come in contact with other situations, other people, and watch the tendency to want to use someone else's difficulty or confusion to bring out our own negativity or blame them for something because things aren't going just right. It's very, very difficult, and it doesn't help particularly to blame yourself or correct yourself. It seems to be very important to just watch the energy do that movement. And this is where the ego or the self-centered mind does not want to admit that it's, you could say, wrong. It actually isn't. It's just involved in that kind of mini skirmishes in the mind. So the idea is to bring as much awareness into that as possible, so that we can actually relax into that negativity and stop fighting. But you can't stop fighting by like, stop fighting, that kind of thing. It has to be something where you see it so clearly that the energy of warfare just starts to shrivel. Because it's not getting the fuel of being pushed or being validated or being judged or being analyzed. It's not getting all of that. Sheldon.
You were talking about the exertion of awareness, energy when difficulty arises. How does that happen when difficulty arises with ourselves? Where does that energy of awareness come from? Where can we get the exertion of that energy awareness?
You're going to need to paraphrase yourself because it's a little bit, the question has got a lot of loose ends there. So what's your basic question?
So you were talking about when we deal with people in difficult situations.
Yes.
There can be exertion applied, but that exertion needs to be awareness energy.
Yes.
And it seems like that when our own difficulty arises, that awareness energy should be available in that situation as well.
And I think it is if one practices a lot to sit still and watch what moves and get the mind that is pushing this way, pulling this way, going this way and going that way, to bring the awareness, the attention to so that we can see the movement of it. It's going and then it comes back and it goes this way and then it pushes this way and then it retreats and then it buys into this and it rejects that and then it shuts down, and it seems to be very necessary to see all of that energy. And when we begin to see that energy, the very energy that's used to fight with the world is the same energy that can be used, you could say, not by way of absconding with it, but just the energy that actually is being sucked out of your awareness to go to some kind of crazy warfare about stopping this, starting that, getting this to happen, making sure that doesn't happen, making sure they don't think about what you're thinking about what they're thinking. It's an endless circular, that's why they call it samsara, circles. But if you can strengthen your awareness, then you can begin to see, you can bring awareness, you could say, into your own mind, your own consciousness. There's plenty of I should say, energy there for that, and that energy is just about being present. And it's very easy to buy into right and wrong, or correct and incorrect, or looks good, looks bad. I can feel it sitting here. I've got a couple dozen eyes looking at me, and everybody's has their own evaluations or judgments or whatever going on of some kind. So, and am I concerned? Am I not concerned? I'm not doing anything with it. I'm aware of it. But if I do anything with it, then I begin to become self-conscious, and the energy goes that way. And then the self that is not real starts to think there's something going on, that something needs to be defended, or I need to look better, or I need to say things just right so people won't think I'm a bad teacher or idiot. It's very possible to, yes.
If we feel like we have a little burst of realization,
Yes.
Is there anything to be done with that?
Not much, but it's not so much a credential or something you need to put in your little, hope chest. But it's just something that happens. Just watch what that is. Watch how it comes up. Watch how it twinkles for a while, and then it fades away. Anything that occurs will vanish. Realization does not occur. It's not an occurrence. That's why I've been saying this for years, you're grandmothered in. As soon as you see it, you realize you've always known this. You've known it from before this lifetime. And this may sound, woo-woo, talking about other lives again. But I'm not. I'm talking about this. Everything is available right here, right now. So you just notice that, and I wouldn't do much with it. It means something, but it doesn't mean a lot. Anytime you separate, this means something, that doesn't, you're back to a very subtle form of duality. It would be like me saying, I'm awake and you guys aren't. What if I'm thinking that but not saying it? So anytime you set up any kind of duality, I mean, if you awaken, everywhere you look, you'll see nothing but awakening. You see the Buddha everywhere. Everything is awake. Everything is what happened in my retreat so many years ago. Nothing sleeps. Everywhere you look, you see bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, as the saying goes. But the individuals, because of their being kind of trapped by their own causes and conditions, you know, that it's like everybody is born and they immediately put on a cloak, cover themselves up. And our culture, because we're not separate, it's actually because of no separation that we buy into that, because we're scared into it, or maybe from another a dimension, or never. This situation goes on for, this is just one little thin candy shell. You know, it goes on and on and on and on. How do I know? I don't. The best kind of knowing is not to know. If you don't know anything, then there isn't anything you don't know. You know that doesn't work. You don't believe anything I say. Don't disbelieve it. Because then you're on the other end of the teeter-totter.
Do energy and space relate?
So they're both concepts. Energy is a concept that points to some particular thing, and space is a concept that points to some other aspect of our parent situation. And so it's you know, when you ask the question, you need to be more specific what you're saying.
Space in terms of looking at the senses and adding, if you're in a difficult situation, you have a lot of energy going one way or the other.
Yeah.
And you're turned to senses to add space. Does that do anything to the energy?
It doesn't matter. Energy doesn't belong to anybody. Space doesn't belong to anybody. Awareness doesn't belong to anybody. It's like we all are quite impressed by a big explosion, like, you know, a big bomb, like the mother of all, what is that, mother of all meatballs, whatever that thing was. We're all impressed by a huge thing, but there's the most powerful invisible energy is gravity. It's just because it's not a show-off. You can quote me. Sew it on your pillowcase. Gravity's not a show-off. I don't know who I stole that from, but somebody. So the best, when I say the best, I'm saying just as a suggestion, look at those concepts, and then for you personally, I'm not sure exactly what those are pointing to for you, but I would look at what they're pointing to, each one, and then see if you can see beyond those two concepts and see what is the relationship between those two situations. See it for yourself. My answer would be probably not as good as your understanding yourself, but it is. Any other questions?
What does awake mean?
Awake? Awake is a concept that means not asleep.
What's sleep?
Wake is a concept that means not awake. It's just a polarized kind of thing. Fundamentally there isn't any sleep. Nothing sleeps. Things are turned in, and have an apparent, hiding out kind of thing, because they buy into some kind of separation of I'm somebody and I need to protect myself or I need to advance myself. And that's why the practice, the image that Trungpa Rinpoche used for the sitting practice of meditation, it's like jumping, like you're a vegetable, and you jump into a pot of boiling water, and it boils you until you're, no longer have any orange carrot look. I think he says somewhere something like, get down back in there, you're too orange. So it's like an understanding that you don't have to be special, you don't have to be admired, you don't have to have a good reputation. Not that you have to have a bad one either, but you're no longer particularly concerned about your credentials. And if you're on this path, a lot of your attention is going towards helping others, whether they know it or not. They may be, the person who shows up as a helping person quite often is, a lot of their energy is going to looking like they're helping. Whereas the person who is actually helping, you may never even know that they're helping. They may help you in a way that is invisible. Is it time to go eat oryoki food? Any final questions? Yes, Kevin.
I read one time Trungpa Rinpoche said something like first thought, best thought, but not necessarily in that order. Is that anything like spontaneous and gradual?
I think it could. I mean, he's basically what he was encouraging people. My understanding is that when you whatever comes up for you is probably what is important, because we're basically already aligned with what we need to do. We're already on track. We just don't trust ourselves because we're afraid that, well, what if something goes wrong? Well, just being born a human being means something's going to go wrong. That's the very nature of being a human being, something going wrong. So yeah, it's kind of an encouragement, I think. It was certainly helpful to me when I first heard that many years ago, to think, well, you could just be with whatever comes up is probably pretty good. Not that you have to always lock down on that, but you could at least kind of test it. First thought, best thought, whatever comes up, the thought is coming out of the awareness. So it isn't third thought, that's come out of the other thoughts, and those are starting to build up some kind of momentum about I need to be right, and I need to make sure I don't make any mistakes. Especially I don't want to make a mistake that somebody else notices and takes my inventory and reports me to the right action police. So first thought, best thought. And it's not actually even a thought, it's just that first kind of idea or understanding about something. And it's not that that's necessarily correct. It could be like the first time you see somebody, you might think, I don't like them. First thought. But when it's saying best thought, it doesn't mean that this is always going to be a nice situation. It might be this person is actually fine for you to work with. You get to like them and so on. But what you picked up on is some kind of negative energy that was there, that wasn't theirs personally. They weren't going to do anything with it, but you picked up on that. So the consciousness, the awareness, as we go along, and as we start to, I like to say, as we start to move that awareness past the thinking process and prioritize, so the awareness starts to lead our lives, then you're going to be in the position of first thought, best thought a lot. You're going to be in actually the position of no thought. No thought, best thought. So, yes.
How do you know if you haven't had thoughts?
You won't know. Because if you know you haven't had thoughts, that's thoughts.
Is there any way to report on not having thoughts?
Just tell me about it and I'll tell you.
Well, the other day I didn't have any thoughts.
How was that?
I don't know.
Aha. I don't know. I like that. Only don't know. Good idea. Very good. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Let's have oryoki. Who are cooks?